Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Fantasy for the Ages, the show where a father and son get together and talk about fantasy, science fiction, and other nerdy things we enjoy. If you enjoy our episode here today, a book blast, where Zach's reacting to Hyperion by Dan Simmon.
Correct.
Then be sure to like the episode down below. Subscribe to our channel if you haven't yet. We really love all those subscribers. Consider joining us as a Patreon supporter. Information for that is down in the show notes, as well as all the other ways that you can interact with Zach and I: Discord, social media, even email. So Hyperion is one I haven't read. It's on my TBR. Zach, I'm curious. Is this fantasy? Is this science fiction? Is this yes?
I'd put this science fiction.
Okay.
Hard science fiction.
Hard. All right.
There are some things that may be a little bit more fantastical, but I really think it's just science fiction.
Dan Simmon is an author writing this book, and there's really 3 more that come sort of with it. And you've only read this one so far.
Yes, but I know that at least one of them is very with it.
Yes. Hyperion Falls?
The Fall of Hyperion, I think.
The Fall of Hyperion.
And I know it's very with it, not just because of the title, but because
this one ends on a cliffhanger or something?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It ends on a cliffhanger. It ends on a, okay, we finally think we know what's going on in this story. And wait, that's the end?
So you definitely would need to read the next. Not everybody digs this story. In particular, these 4 books that kind of go to a quartet. Dan Simmon is a little controversial as an author. Did you feel any of that in the first book? Do you see anything where you're like, oh, I can see why people would not care
At
for
least
this?
in the first book, I really didn't get anything too out there. I mean, maybe I just didn't notice it because I was a little lost.
You had trouble figuring out what the heck's going on in this book?
Well, it's a book.
Yes, we agree.
But it's not necessarily one story.
Okay.
Really, this is a book that is a self-contained reason for a collection of short stories.
Interesting. I'm not sure I understood that, but
I can, without spoiling, tell you that the plot of this book involves a group of people that are together for a reason, and while they are together, they are telling their personal stories and reasons for why they are there to each other.
Okay.
And so most of the book is actually us getting their tellings of these stories, with between each story bits that further the plot eventually. So at the very end, we are through those stories and have traveled enough to be kind of what they're doing, but we don't actually do any of it yet. That's going to be the next book.
So this is almost all just setup.
Yeah, it feels like a collection of short stories.
But those stories are interesting.
That are interesting and give you shape to the world.
Okay.
When you start, they tell you bits and pieces of the world without explaining it, and they're just like, you're in this world. And if you're catching it and you're fast, great, awesome, more power to you. But there are so many things about this world worlds that don't make sense until you are multiple short stories in. You're halfway through the book before you actually have a feeling for what is the shape of this world.
Okay.
Who are these people? Not just the people we're talking with, but who is society? What does humanity look like at this point? And it's very cleverly done, I think, in that it slowly reveals and shows this over time. But I think the author could lose readers a lot of the time through this. I found myself getting sucked into each of the stories and enjoying each of those self-contained.
Yeah.
But therefore being like, I don't really care about the overall plot of what's actually happening because I feel like nothing's happening, or I don't know enough about the world, so I'm lost every time.
Okay.
Until I was at least halfway through and had enough bits and pieces where I'm like, okay, now I get the vibe of the world. Now I can continue onwards. It was such a weird experience, and yet I really enjoyed it. And I get the feeling that the reasons that I enjoyed it will not be in any of the other books in this series. So I need to read the next one at some point just to know what actually happens, at least in the main story.
Yeah.
But I almost don't want to, because I feel like it's gonna be a little more normal, straightforward plot. And I don't think that's going to be as interesting. I think the reason that this book is interesting is the weird shape to its narrative. And I think it's worth reading for that. You're going to have to read the second one at some point. I will. And I don't know if I'll go on to read the other two then at that point, because it'll really depend on what does the second book do.
All right.
As to whether or not I care enough about the world to read about it.
Well, time will tell. All right. You intrigued me. That's more than I knew about the book going in. I just knew it was something out there I should read at some point. Thank you very much. Again, if you've already read Hyperion and you have thoughts on what Zach is saying, that's what the comment box is for. So
now, notably, I did actually first find it through TikTok. Because someone was going through like the New York Times 100 best sci-fi books or something.
Yep.
And it was on the list.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought the premise sounded interesting, as well as I thought the cover looked really cool. The cover that I saw is a new updated cover that I think looks really cool. The original cover is one of those that I said in a video that you may or may not have seen, that
80s covers suck.
Yeah, it sucks. It's so bad. I don't like it.
But the book within the cover surpasses the poor cover. That's what you're saying.
But more, the new cover is so good. It's so good.
Okay, so don't judge a book by its cover, but sometimes you can judge a book by its cover.
If you have the opportunity and want to get this book in paper copy, get the new cover. It looks so much better.
All right. Any other thoughts on this book before we wrap?
Nah, I'm good.
I will be interested to hear your thoughts on The Fall of Hyperion at some point, since you're not even sure you want to read it. But you will.
I will.
So,
that one I'm going to have to.
To determine whether you, now that you've read it, wish you hadn't, or you totally understand and you're so glad you did. That will be an interesting thing to learn. That's all we have for you today, everyone. Thanks for watching, and we'll talk to you next time.